welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 211th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 705th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of April 29th, 2021. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
The banner moment. Just words? Maybe. The banner moment. That's why you're listening to us on a Thursday night when the NFL draft is on. Definitely. The banner moment, are they just words? Possibly. No. The banner moment, it's a vision. Absolutely. Banners, it's what Indiana basketball is all about. Okay, so this Wednesday I participated in my first poetry slam. Did so to impress Mrs. Tonsoni, but also to move out of my comfort zone. Liked it so much I thought I would bring some poetry to Assembly Call Radio. Honestly, I believe I am witnessing poetry in basketball, a vision, a hire, recruiting, and some promotion. This week's banner moment is watching Scott Dolson's vision take place in real time. So far, it's more than just words. Thanks, Scott. Okay, let me introduce my esteemed co-hosts for tonight. Andy and Ryan are off tonight, and Jared will be joining us later. But here with me now is one of the two godfathers of IU podcasting, the head of sports media department at Indiana, and a man who may be choosy about which national sandwich brands he will and will not shill for, but who always has some whiskey in the wintertime for you.
Whiskey in the winter time for you.
What a pull. Hey, everybody, it's Galen Clavio. What's up, Galen? What is your take on IU basketball? How you feeling this week?
Coach, doing great. Thanks for having me on as normal, and great to see all you folks out there. I apologize if you've already listened to Crimson Cast and you're getting another 90 minutes of me or whatever it is on this show. But, look, it feels like springtime for IU athletics and IU basketball in general, both literally and figuratively. We're going to talk a lot about that throughout the course of the show. And I know from my own perspective, and I'm in kind of a unique spot here at IU, that it feels different, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit. It feels like something really positive, something better is beginning with IU athletics and IU basketball in particular. So I'm excited. I'm juiced. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm not endorsing any sandwich shops during however long we're on the show here tonight. I've got my own list of endorsements, and nothing with bread is involved with them.
It's interesting on our part because Jared produces the run sheets, and you read some parts and you don't read others, and then you're going live and you're like, okay, I hope this is coming across the right way that Jared intended it to. But we're glad to have you here, and it does feel a lot different. I'm trying to put my finger on it as well. Whether you're all in 100%, IU's going to win the national title, or you're cautiously optimistic, there it's a different feel, and it's a feel that we deserve as a community, in my opinion.
Yeah, here's the thing. People have asked me this. I get some feedback once in a while. Like, I feel like I'm getting too excited about IU football or IU basketball, and it's okay. Like, go ahead and get excited. It's fine. And just because you're excited about what's going on with your programs doesn't mean that if they don't win the national championship that somehow you were wrong. Like, it's all like there's these levels of accomplishment. And I think the hallmark of a good program, the hallmark of a program that you and I are used to rooting for from back when we were younger is, you might not win the national title or a conference title every year, but you can still be excited and still be proud and still be almost arrogant about the program that you support, or the programs that you support in this case. And that's kind of how I've approached it. I mean, there's been no wins on the floor or on the field. Nothing's happened. Nothing's going to happen for a few months at least, to start with. And that's all right. We can bathe in the glow of what's going on social media, what's going on in recruiting. It's A-okay.
Yeah, and it's just a good feeling. It's one, like you said, that if you've been a fan of the Indiana basketball program for a while, you felt before. It was going into Assembly Hall and figuring you're going to win. And okay, if you lost, you walked out a little disappointed, but you never thought for at any point during that game you were going to lose. It's that confidence, that little bit of cockiness in your program, and it's starting to inch back. And I think that's been very enjoyable for me the last month. But here's what we're going to cover this week. We have some Hoosier headlines for you, including some jersey number announcements. The main topic is the rebranding of Indiana basketball. We've kind of hinted upon that in our opening. And at the end, we have a lot of questions. Thanks to the chat mob and our community, there are a lot of great questions coming through on a weekly basis, and we really appreciate that. All of that is coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. Before we jump into Hoosier headlines, I want to give you a heads up on a website you need to check out soon, with Mother's Day now just over a week away and Father's Day coming up a month after that. You need a thoughtful, unique gift for the sports moms and dads in your life, which means you really should pick out something from Playbook products. They offer an incredible selection of fun, high-quality coasters and coffee mugs that feature diagrams of famous plays. For IU, it's the Watt Shot, Keith Smart Shot, and more. For the White Sox, you've got Paul Konerko's World Series Grand Slam, Dwayne Wise catch, and more. For the Pacers, it's moments like Reggie Miller's 8 points in 9 seconds and silencing Spike Lee. And for the Steelers, I mean, come on, you could probably guess which Steeler plays are on there. They literally have something for every pro team and a ton of college teams as well. These are unique gifts that the sports fan in your life will appreciate, which is why Andy got them for Jared all those years ago, and now we're happy to tell you about them here on the show. So go to assemblycall.com/pp. That's assemblycall.com/pp and start browsing. You'll definitely find something for yourself or the sports fan in your life. And here's a bonus. When you use that URL, assemblycall.com/pp, they know that we sent you, so we get a 15% commission on your entire order. Go to assemblycall.com/pp and pick out your coasters and mugs today. That's assemblycall.com/pp. All right, so here we go with some Hoosier headlines. Indiana basketball was very great on social media this week. My guy, family friend Andrew Brown is breaking out with his video work. But the New Jersey numbers, they announced New Jersey numbers. Xavier Johnson will be 0, had previously worn number 1 at Pitt. Rob Finney from 10 to taking Al Durham's old number 1. Miller Kopp will be 12, as he was at Northwestern, and Logan Duncombe will be 51, which is his high school number, and Tamar Bates, 53, to honor his grandma. Only 2 Hoosiers have ever worn 53 recently, I believe. Tom Geyer and someone I'm related to, my brother-in-law, Ross Hales, also wore 53 for his brief goon moments at the University of Minnesota when he got in, and all the things they talked about him back in 93, 94. So it's just bringing back a lot of good memories of number 53 on the basketball court. But Tamar, the serious thing is it's really cool to see you honor your grandmother, and that's pretty cool too. Mike Roberts leaves Indiana and takes a coaching job at Cincinnati. We wish Coach Roberts a lot of luck. It was fun listening to him to shout out all the calls and that, and I know that he wants to be a head coach at some point, so this is a positive move for Coach Roberts. The NCAA officially ratifies the one-time transfer legislation. That was expected, and then the name, image, likeness laws continue to move forward, but the NCAA is dragging its feet a little bit. 11 states have these laws in place and maybe to go in effect as soon as July, which means athletes could be getting some money there. 15 other states have laws moving through the process. Indiana is not one of those states. And the NCAA is likely to follow a lawsuit asking for an injunction so they can figure out some kind of national standard. The NCAA did not announce anything definitive this week, just kicked stuff down the road, hoping that someone else, Congress, will do that. And they also extended Mark Emmert to 2025, which could be a whole rant of every one of us, Ryan, Galen, Scott, and probably Phil, an entire show about. I'd like to get extended for doing that kind of job performance because I guess that's my personal take. But those are some headlines. Galen, what do you want to hit first?
Oh, gosh. I mean, any of those would be good entry points. Let's start with the roster numbers are mundane, but always fascinating. Is this the most 50-plus numbers that we've had on an IU team at once ever?
Yeah, and they're usually the bigger dudes. You know, it's going to be interesting to see Tamar fly around and drive the lane and shoot threes with the 50 number on his back.
We had it with Earl Calloway. That's about the only one that I can really remember. But it's a little bit unusual, but it's cool. I mean, I think it's always weird when existing players change numbers, and I don't know if it's going to be that much of an adaptation to see Rob Finney wearing 1 instead of 10, but maybe that's good. I think Rob needed a complete mojo change from the last couple of seasons, and I think getting him into a different number, maybe that just ends up being what lights the spark for him. And the rest of them, it'll just be nice to see the guys in uniform, honestly. And from the standpoint of how it all fits together on the floor, I think the bigger question is, like, what numbers are even going to be on the floor at this point? It's almost impossible at this stage. This roster feels more full and deeper than we've seen in several years for IU. And trying to predict even who's going to be on the floor at this point is a little bit of a guessing game.
Yeah, and from a coaching standpoint, I was really intrigued with Rob's number change. At first, I thought maybe someone moving in was doing it and he was just giving up the number 10, but that's not what's happened. And I think you're spot on with maybe it's a psychological thing too. You've had some struggles, some health struggles, a tough year last year, and you're just going to change things up. And that stuff works sometimes. It's not just the X's and O's and the workout and are you crossing over or is your elbow in? That stuff's all important too. But a part of coaching is trying to figure out ways to free up the mind. And I really think that sports performance aspect is a real thing at all levels. And moving from 10 to 1 is a change in itself, but 1 is the number for Mr. Basketball in the state of Indiana. So I've done that with athletes too, like giving them a nickname, giving them something, call them something, give them a number, just so I could use that to try to promote them and make them feel better about their play so that the physical stuff can come on. So that's one that really grabbed me, was his choice, because he's a veteran. He didn't have to. So right. There's something to signal there, and I think it's nothing but positive. And maybe I'm looking way too much into number changes, but
I mean, look, I think it all feeds into a larger narrative, which we'll see this year if the narrative's true or false. I mean, a lot of this is just us talking, but you can either buy into the idea that the IU basketball players were just irrevocably broken and that this is just a group that isn't very good, that a group that's not very talented, that can't play at this level. Or you can buy into the idea that this is a talented group of players that had lost their mojo, had lost their confidence in different ways, whether it was individually or collectively. And so anything to break that up and to give people a different perspective internally in their own minds about who they are, what their identity is, how they fit on the floor with each other, and what they can do by themselves, I think is something that you have to take a crack at. And so I think for Rob Finney, it's like jumping into a phone booth and coming out with the Superman cape on. Like, to some degree, if you can get him thinking about himself as a different player than number 10 last year, to me, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a positive thing.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the NCAA. I know we've had shows about this in the past, about the NIL stuff and explaining all that, but from afar, it just seems to me the NCAA drags its feet on innovation and things that are good for its student athletes. And, I heard a few podcasts talk about the extension of Emmert, but you go with the name, image, likeness stuff. The NCAA makes rules all the time. I don't know why they couldn't make a rule that benefits players, and they say they have to wait for Congress and all. I don't think they do. It seems to me like the NCAA stubs its toe on purpose, whether it's the women's basketball equipment issues and the lack of equality there or not, that you got to have people in that organization that are forward thinking, or you're not a good organization. Am I missing something?
I think the problem with the NCAA is it is a bureaucracy on top of a bureaucracy. It's a collection of all of the schools that are members, which is like 1,000 schools. Now, there's only 353 that are at Division I, and it's even a smaller number that matter out of that group from a voting perspective. But you've got that, and then you've got the actual executive leadership, which is different from that group. And you can read the piece in The Atlantic that Nicole Auerbach put together after the NCAA snuck in the announcement in like the 5th paragraph of a press release that Emmert had been extended. And you read the comments from athletic directors and other people in college athletics, and they're all just aghast. They're like, what is this? This is the dumbest thing. They're rewarding this person. There's a couple of things about that to keep in mind. In many ways, Mark Emmert's role is much like Roger Goodell's role at the NFL level, where he is there to take abuse. He is there to deflect criticism of the membership, of which there should be plentiful criticism, by being a piñata for all of the critiques of the NCAA, a piñata for the weight incident with the women's basketball tournament or with NIL or whatever. It's like steering a battleship, but even slower. Like whatever's bigger than a battleship in the water, essentially trying to change the way that the NCAA does its business. There is a tremendous level of stasis when it comes to modifying the game, moderating what you do with athletes. And there's a real fear among institutions that anything that you do to open up the floodgates of athletes getting compensation is going to lead to the ruin of the profit centers that most of these colleges and universities have developed over the course of the last 25 years. And there's still a big parochial attitude about not paying players, or players, should be grateful that they're even getting the chance to be at college playing sports. So you wrap all that up, you're going to get this kind of a situation where you re-up a very unpopular executive director who doesn't seem to be doing a good job. You drag your feet on name, image, and likeness because you can't come to a consensus within your own organization, but you want to retain the right to make the decision rather than what's going on with all of these states passing their own individual laws. And if you're, they've been waiting for Congress to do something. I don't think Congress is going to really get anything done for them in the timetable that they're talking about. And so, look, it's easy to look at the NCAA and be critical of what they do. And I think there's a lot of reasons to do that. What ultimately comes down to is a lot of what we perceive as them being slow is actually just them being slow. It's not them dragging their feet on purpose. It's they're dragging their feet because that's the only way that they can operate. They're not swift enough as an organization to be at the front end of things. They're constantly on the back end.
Is there anything as fans that do we just sit back and watch it turn slowly, or is it? I mean, I know there's no influence, right? We have no influence. We're going to buy tickets. We're going to go to events. We're going to fill, the football stadiums for the Final Four and do all that because of the sport. But it just seems frustrating to me that, the millions of dollars that are generated and these athletes can just get a piece of it. I've just really changed because I'm an old guy and I can understand how you want to, hold on to that the way amateurism was, but I've changed. So I've changed, and I think people are open to that, but it doesn't seem like the organization running sport is. And that to me is frustrating because I think it's a win-win for people. But
the problem is there's too many stakeholders. They've got too many other things going on. You've got university presidents who are committed to the academic mission. They look at athletics at best as a way to engage alumni and get donations. At worst, they look at it as a detraction or a distraction from the academic mission of the university. They look at the drinking and the tailgating and the stuff that goes on around it as being, the bread and circuses, to borrow a phrase that was used by a former Indiana professor that will not be named. But then you got athletic directors who's like, this is our job. Like, this is what we do. We have, hundreds of millions of dollars in budget that's committed to making this work on a year-by-year basis. And so you've got this being pulled in a bunch of different directions. And you've got the NCAA who, the only reason the NCAA exists as an entity is as an enforcement arm of a book of rules that not even all of the schools can agree on. So you think about it from the standpoint of a place like Indiana. And for IU fans, if you're thinking about name, image, and likeness and being like, well, why does this matter? Like, why should we care? That's how Indiana takes advantage of some of the financial inequities that keep it below an Ohio State or a Michigan. You have to be a place that takes advantage of potential rules changes where you can get athletes coming in who can capitalize on their name, image, and likeness. You promote athletes. You allow athletes to tell their own stories. You really go fully into that, which I think we'll talk about here a little bit later on in the show. that's how you help to level the playing field, because you're not going to level it through selling football tickets. Because even if Indiana sells out the stadium, they're still at less than half capacity of like 3 other schools in the conference. So you have to find those other things. But not everybody feels that way in the NCAA. And so it's one of the many things that creates problems and concerns with trying to fix anything. Because if you can't get consensus, you can't do much.
And Galen points out a really good thing. If they're going to be slow to change it, let's be Indiana and take advantage of it. And we're going to talk about that coming up here in segment 2. And what you're seeing is some rebranding of the Indiana basketball and taking advantage of that. And so it's been the biggest story of the week, the splash IU made on social media. And who better to discuss it than the man who literally wrote the book on sports and social media. So stick with us on the Assembly Call. All right. Very good. Very good. First segment. And we'll just get right into it. I'm just going to ask you your thoughts on the tweet. There were a couple of them. I thought Kenya Hunter's was fantastic too, a week or so ago. And then obviously Andrew Brown's a friend of the family. He went to school with the Hales family up in Westview. And So Andrew was introduced to us when he was a freshman, sophomore, would come out to our tailgate and we'd give him some breakfast. He's a member of the IU marching band, and his story is pretty interesting, how he got an internship at the Cuban Center and just has parlayed that into something. And boy, he really loves what he does. And that, I thought that was just a really, really well done piece of social media. But again, for me, Galen, and let's make sure we take it there in case I don't do a good job of moderating this, and Jared's going to pop in here shortly. But it's more than just one tweet. It's the messaging. It's the whole entire messaging and that attitude, again, of Indiana basketball is Indiana basketball. We're a blue blood and we're reclaiming it. And we're going to be back to home court advantage. And I just feel that's happening. And it could have happened without an IU guy, but the IU guy and Mike Woodson being the right, just the vision of Scott Dolson's just been, I think, really fantastic. So that's what we'll get into here. Anything before we get moving?
No
questions about anything. All right, let's go.
Okay.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. Hey, let me ask you a question. How do you keep up with the fire hose of information that comes out almost every day about IU basketball? It's crazy during the off season, especially this off season. Well, we've got your back. We send out a free weekly email newsletter on Sunday mornings that rounds up the most important and interesting IU basketball stories from the previous week, and it keeps you up to date on your Hoosiers. We have over 8,000 fellow IU fans on the list, and we want you to be there too. So go to assemblycall.com or join.assemblycall.com to subscribe for free now. That's join.assemblycall.com. You can also text to IU for 66866. That's IU to 66866. Okay, I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni. I'm here with Galen Clavio, the head of IU Sports Media Department and the author of Social Media and Sports, which is currently available in paper on Amazon for $80.82. If you need some further study after our conversation tonight.
There's an ebook version as well, I think, that's cheaper. Feel free to buy that.
So we like to support our guests on the show here with our announcements. But IU and social media, it's been the talk of this week. A lot of podcast talk. Jared had Jeremy Gray and Andrew Brown, the young man from the Cuban Center that produced the video about the free throw shooting tweets and all of that stuff. And it's been a really interesting time from the decision to move away from Archie Miller to the hiring of Scott Woodson to now what we're seeing behind the scenes is an emphasis of moving people inside the athletic department to take advantage of some of the things that are available through media of today. Galen, first of all, just your thoughts on the the anti-yoga tweet video, whatever it's being called, that was put out by Indiana men's basketball. That for those of you who have not seen it, which probably everyone, they had a yoga tweet with some videos, and then someone sent some criticizing tweets about, hey, why don't you go shoot free throws? You need to be in the gym. Don't do yoga, in essence. And then the IU men's basketball program kind of had a little bit of a troll back. I thought it was an excellent attitude shift. We'll talk about the behind the scenes there, but just your thoughts about the tweet itself and maybe its meaning, Galen.
Well, the tweet was obviously great. I mean, I just retweeted it and said bravo when I saw it because it was obviously just really well constructed. From beginning to end, whether all of the different elements in there, it was just as high quality as the other tweets that we see out of Indiana men's basketball, out of IU football. I mean, the level of expertise, the level of quality in these social media messages that have come out of IU over the course of the last couple of years really have just been at a different level. And that one in particular, I think, was really important, not just because it was well done, not just because it was well received, but it really did mark, I think, a sea change in the way that IU has decided to approach things on social media. And, so much of what we end up with in terms of the way that the basketball program interacts with its fans and the people that are on social media and just out there in general has been, it's gradually shifted over the course of time. And so when I think about that tweet, the fact that it gets approved, the fact that it's out there, and it's just kind of, it's gotten talked about a bunch, so it's not exactly the normal run of business. But I think it will become the normal run of business, and that's exciting because so much of being successful on social media now is not just the facts. It's not just, here's when we're playing, and here's the stat sheet. And, there's a lot more to it than that. And I think this has always been the case, but I think now we're seeing IU comfortable enough in its own skin as an athletic department and as a basketball program to really embrace that.
And I think that's important. I've been known and I got to kind of roll on this team of being the old man and clamoring for the old things. No Hoosier hysteria, more practice and less videos and all that stuff. But I'll go on and correct myself, or at least I know why it's important. It's important to connect the fan base, especially the younger fan base, to what Indiana basketball really is. And it's really important for the basketball program to connect with possible recruits down the line and show what they mean. And so, yeah, my shtick on the show is to be that old codger clamoring for walking 20 miles one way in the snow and winning banners. And I still am there. I'd rather see wins than videos. But it's a very, very important thing because when you run a basketball program as a head coach, you got to take the entire picture in. It's not just what offense you're deciding to do or defense and game night adjustments. It's about setting the tone and putting your players in the best position to succeed. And we live, whether us old guys like it or not, we live in a social media world, and you need to take advantage of it. And we hinted upon that in the first section about the name, image, and likeness. Whether you like it, don't like it, agree or not, take advantage of it. If you have an advantage, good administration, good people in business, whatever, take advantage of things that are presented to them, whether it's old-fashioned or not. But I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the yoga one, started doing a little bit of yoga too. They inspired me to do a little bit of that. But social media is important. And you talked about that sea change. And I'm going to take back Dane Fife in his media conversation with said something about it used to be the fan base had a little insulation for the program. They would get mad when there was a loss, but they would show up and fill the corners of the balconies, and they would still root and go forward. And I felt that tweet was a little bit of, hey, you can be mad at us for missing free throws, but we're shooting free throws, and we want you to be with us. And I thought that was I thought that was funny, but I thought it was that sea change of we're going to be back to wearing the candy stripes. We're going to be back to talking banners. We're going to be back to we're going to get good recruits, and we're going to come compete for championships again. And it might not be this year, but it's going to be soon. And we're coming. And I love that cocky confidence in an appropriate way.
It's funny because the level of media presence that we've seen from IU since all of this happened, since Mike Woodson came in, since Dane Fife got hired, has been at another level. Like, it feels like the program like stepped out from behind the curtain and was like, hey, here we are. And that's much needed. And I think that I can't remember if it was Scott that said this on Crimson Cast or if this was Jared when he was talking to Jeremy Gray on the podcast on Assembly Call. But this is a program that really needs a strong hand at the wheel who's able to tell them what's going on and tell them things that, straight up, because that is essentially what the program had under Bob Knight. It's essentially what fans of a certain age were weaned on. And frankly, fans that haven't been weaned on that have actually, I think I have a lot of sympathy for younger fans. Like if you became a fan post Knight, you have had a very weak succession of leadership, not just in, the basketball program, but in terms of like the messaging overall about the basketball program and about most of the other sports. Like, it's really only been in the last 5 to 6 years that we've started to see a more consistent, stronger, supportive, positive messaging coming out of people. And, look, the Dane Fife is right. In the 90s, I was in school 97 to 01. I was a contemporary of Dane's when, we weren't winning championships or going to the Sweet 16, but there was still an attitude that, well, coach knows what he's doing. This is still a top program. We're in a little bit of a lull, but things are going to get better. We haven't had that for 20 years. I mean, there's been a few individual moments of excellence, whether it was 02 or 12 or 13 or 16. That's like 4 years out of a 20-year span that you could point to as a fan and say, well, hey, this is great. This is, this shows that we're a top program. The rest of the time, there's been a lot to criticize. There's been a lot to complain about. And so I think it's realistic that IU fans would react well to the kind of messaging that says, be proud to be a Hoosier. Don't let people talk crap about the program. It's going to take a little bit of adaptation to get used to. And I think there's still got to be results. And, those results are ultimately going to decide how people feel about tweets like that, about Dane Fife going out and talking about, there needs to be some fan insulation around the program. But I feel more confident now than I have at any point really in the last 20 years that will happen, because I feel like the right people are in place. There is Mike Woodson's got this cool energy and demeanor about him. He's this wonderful people person that just has turned on a bunch of people to his way of doing things. You've got Dane Fife, who's got this kind of, there's this almost cockiness, as you mentioned, this attitude that's always been around Dane. Like, even going back to when he was a player, you could sense that with him. And that's what you need. Like, IU used to be Duke or Kentucky. Like, they used to be in the 80s and early 90s, that program. And yeah, they haven't been that from a success standpoint for a long time, but there's no reason why they can't be again. And a lot of it is believing. I think if we can take anything from the Tom Allen experiment at IU football, like, Allen has willed this program, has made this program and its players believe in itself, even when their talent level isn't appreciably different from what it was 4 or 5 years ago. Belief is such a key element of what you do in sports. And that extends over to the messaging, because if you believe, your fans believe, and then everybody's a lot happier, because you can lose a game here or there and you're still like, it's all right, we're going to be fine. Whereas, frankly, under Tom Crean, under Archie Miller, when the bottom started to fall out, everybody started pointing fingers. And I count myself in this as someone who's run a Twitter account and done a podcast and talked about IU sports for a decade. I've been critical. I've felt like people, like the program doesn't know what it's doing and there's no direction and things like that. And I don't feel that way anymore. So maybe that's hypocritical of me. I'm not sure, but I really feel like now that there is there are figures, not just one figure, but multiple figures in place that can lead and are willing to lead and understand the fabric of Indiana basketball. And you have an athletic department that is geared towards maximizing that feeling of belief, that emotion that people have about Indiana athletics. That's where magic can start to happen. And that's where I think this tweet, Kenya Hunter's tweet that Jared talked to him about, like, all of these things start to come together. And IU fans are like, yeah, we got a little bit of we got some coolness going on with our program now, which just hasn't felt that way in a long time.
I really like what you said about leadership, and I'm gonna take that to the choices of coaches. and why Coach Woodson, in the month that I've had to really mull it over, is exactly the right guy to start bringing that swagger back. Go back to the replacement of Knight, and none of the coaches really, again, respect to them. It's a hard job. I know that. But none of them had that toughness that you were talking about to be that voice, to be that calming presence when needed to be calmed, or that antagonizing presence if you needed to stir things up. Coach Knight was so great at doing all of that. And then we went to 20 years of people that the job just got to them, trying to win at that level. And to me, I said this before we got on the air, the hiring of Mike Woodson and this sea change has shown me what we really were missing. And from afar, you were wondering, was it the strategy? Was it the recruiting? No, what it was missing is that strong leadership. And when you talk about social media, it could be, the Cuban Center is great, but if you don't have a guy who's comfortable with allowing the cameras, with allowing conversations with your director of basketball operations or whoever does the meeting with the young producers and all of that, if you're not comfortable in opening up. And one of the biggest things for me, Galen, in this really big change is Mike Woodson's just a cool dude. He's confident in who he is. He doesn't buy into what anyone's saying about his experience at the college level. He doesn't mind bringing in Dane Fife, who wanted the job. He doesn't mind Thad Matta, who's got a big record. He wants Indiana to win again, and he's willing to make this change. As a 63-year-old coach, willing to allow people to film and be inside what he's doing is really awesome. But it does. When you go back now and analyze the leadership from Mike Davis, just really couldn't handle it. Sampson could handle it, but chose to do some things that were questionable and got in trouble. And then Tom Crean, as it's seen, he's struggling now in Georgia. And Archie Miller was just a quiet ball coach. He just wanted to coach basketball. And the Indiana job's more than just basketball. And I think we get someone who does it. And that allows the social media, which is prevalent in this time, to really shine, because you got to have that strong leadership.
It's a multifaceted thing. And I think you bring up a lot of good points. IU, since Knight got fired, and look, if we're being honest, even in the last 5 or 6 years of Knight's tenure, treated the basketball program like a much smaller program than it could be. You look at the organizational structure that surrounds the really big programs in college basketball, and I'm not talking about just Kentucky here, but I'm talking about the North Carolinas, the Kansases. That's the level that Indiana should be at in terms of the way that the program is considered, the way that it's run, the financing around it. And yet, you have to keep in mind, Bob Knight gets fired. Miles Brand decides that he's going to use this as a platform to try to get an Ivy League presidency. So he names a very underqualified coach at the time in Mike Davis, who was not ready for the job. He's admitted that himself, who I think did the best he knew how to do, but it created a lot of problems in terms of people's internal perceptions of Indiana basketball as fans. Like, it no longer felt like a program that was looking at you from above. It felt like a program that was down in the mix with everybody else. And as you mentioned, you have a succession of coaches who are trying to build their own programs almost to the exclusion of the history of Indiana basketball. And it feels like, to a large degree, Indiana spent 20 or so years running from its own shadow with basketball. And I think what makes Woodson at this point such a good hire is that he fully embraces it, but he's not beholden to this particular pattern of doing things that Bob Knight had set down. And to some degree, I think, Knight not really being in shape or condition to come in and kind of hang like a gray eminence over the program probably helps, because Woodson has a free hand working with Scott Dolson, working with Jeremy Gray, we're working with the people on the marketing side and the promotion side to say, all right, well, how do we make this happen? If you haven't listened to the interview with Jeremy, I would highly recommend doing so, because it really does outline what Scott Dolson was trying to do from the get-go and why that's important. And it extends beyond just the social media aspects, but that's a really important part. And it does require buy-in, as you mentioned, from the coaching staff. It does require having players tell the story. I thought that was a really insightful part about what Jeremy was talking about, where, the players are the greatest ambassadors that you can have. And yet a lot of times you get coaches for a variety of reasons. Some of it's old school thinking. Some of it's a concern about being overshadowed by players in your program. They don't want to yield the limelight. They don't want players being more popular than they are. And so you shy away from having players, going on social media talking. And there's also this kind of parochial attitude about not letting college students have reign there. But this is the era of the young person in media capitalizing on their popularity. And it takes, I think, someone like Mike Woodson, who's coached for years in the NBA, who understands the importance of player empowerment as part of the ecosystem of college basketball, of basketball in general, to be able to put something like this into motion. And someone like Dane Fife, frankly, who has been in a program that has a strong central figure, but has managed to stay modern in a way that, frankly, Indiana didn't. And so, there's a lot of really cool things happening simultaneously with IU basketball that have also happened with IU football. It's a very different set of circumstances with football, but it's cool to see all this stuff coming together, because at the end of the day, it helps to give IU fans pride in being IU fans. And it feels like ages where you could just be happily an IU fan and not feel just this twinge of imposter syndrome about, being in the conversation at the highest levels of college sports. And so it's really cool for me to see that.
The coaches all have some things in common, and we probably should do a show about who's leading the programs. But Tom Allen is comfortable in his skin and who he is, and you need that in order to take the criticism and take the heat and the stress and still go forward. That's one of Tom Allen's biggest strengths, and I see that in Coach Woodson. Coach Yeagley is getting it done in soccer. Coach Mercer, Coach Morin, they all have that. When you watch them, they all have that. I call it smooth. It's just they're smooth. They're comfortable in what they're doing, which then allows social media to be used, and it's not a threat to them as a leader. If that's the new thing, if in 5 years there's something else and these leaders are leading our programs, they're likely to adapt to that. Why? Because they care about their athletes, they care about the program, and they want to win. And it's now getting to be a consistent in Indiana athletics, and that's just exciting.
It is. And look, this is we often talk about the 80s as kind of the golden era of IU sports, because you had Knight, you had Mallory, you had Jerry Yeagley, you had just this long list of top level coaches and programs that were really at their apex or close to it. We're kind of close to that now with IU athletics. I mean, and we'll see. The jury's out on Mike Woodson and his staff. We'll see what they do. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but Tom Allen's already the second most successful coach, I think you could say, in IU history. In terms of raw results, you could certainly make an argument for Bo McMillan and where he would land in the big scheme of things. Todd Yeagley, it's a different era, but what he's been able to do over the course of time is pretty impressive. You mentioned Mercer, Ray Lewis with swimming. I mean, there's so many top level coaches at IU and programs that are either in the top 20 or sniffing the top 20 in their respective sports that, this is the time to capitalize on being an IU fan or being at IU in media if you're trying to push things forward. And so, look, it's a sea change. It's a departmental alteration of the way that things have been done. And you go back 15 years ago, I think it's important to talk about and keep in mind how far IU athletics has progressed in terms of messaging, in terms of marketing, in terms of just the way that it conducts itself publicly versus what it was in like 2005, where the department was largely in shambles. It had not been managed well. You'd had that whole Michael McNeely fiasco that had happened, and you went 18 months without a permanent athletic director. I mean, there was a lot of things that happened during that time period that essentially left a blank slate for Fred Glass. And Glass, while I know he gets criticized by some folks in various circles, did so much to set the wheels in motion across the board to get IU to where they're at now, where they can suddenly start capitalizing on things. It took that long to get IU back to being a truly modern athletic department. Now it's there. And so, all of these things that have happened across the board, getting football up and running is something I don't think any of us thought in our lifetimes was going to happen. You can get men's basketball up and running, and, now suddenly you're up in the stratosphere again. It's really, I'm excited about all of that. So
So let me ask you about the person who's heading this athletic program, this modern athletic program, Scott Dolson, and we're hearing a lot about his vision. That has not been made public anywhere, has it? His statement that he's put down. I kind of like that. Sometimes in organizations you can have a vision, but I really believe that when you have a vision, I talk about this all the time in education and don't even want to go there right now, but if you have a vision and all of your decisions are back towards that vision, then you're going to have a better chance of being successful rather than just shotgunning things left and right based on a whim. It just really seems to me like Scott's really got this headed in the right direction, and you got to let things play out, and we can't just jump to conclusions based on 1 month's activity. But you mentioned modern athletic department, and then Scott Dolson has a vision and goes out and hires Mike Woodson, and Woodson puts together his staff, and all of a sudden things are rolling. Your thoughts on Scott Dolson's performance here in the last month and this idea of a vision and how it's playing out? Because to me, it's awesome. And it's just been a really good run here in the last month.
No, I think he's done an awesome job. And it's a 18-month thing. It's something that we've seen since he took over. And I think from the standpoint of just the basketball program and the way that plan has started to pan out, the vision to say, okay, we're going to get a guy he's got the chops to coach. Might not be the first name on people's list because he hasn't coached in college, but we're going to bring that guy in as the head of our program. But we're also going to bring in Thad Matta. We're also going to bring in Dane Fife. We're going to bring in all of these. I mean, they've got consultants and people coming in from all over the place. And it's like there is to me, a realization on the part of Dolson from an operations perspective that what has happened thus far with IU basketball the last 10, 15 years has just not worked. It hasn't gotten IU where it needs to. And that's not criticism of Fred Glass, because I think Fred Glass in the hire that he made did what you would have done in his spot. And even the hire of Tom Crean was not a bad hire per se. It looked good on paper. It didn't pan out long term. That happens sometimes. But Dolson is approaching things from a different perspective. And I think across the board, you can look at that. You can look at the amount of resources that he has agreed to pour into football, making Tom Allen a higher paid coach than the basketball coach. Like, who would have ever thought that the day would come when IU would pay their football coach more? But Dolson sees the long-term investment there. It's like, if you can get football firing on all cylinders for a long period of time, if you can make Tom Allen feel like you don't need to go anywhere else because we'll take care of you here financially, we'll give you whatever resources you need for your staff. That takes that off the table. And now suddenly you've got a coach who's just like, Indiana's my home. This is where I want to be. That attitude pervades, from my perspective, so much of what the athletic department does under Dolson. And again, I think it started under Glass, and Glass did a lot of really good things, but Dolson has such an innate understanding of the inner workings of IU athletics, of the donor structure, having been, such a key figure in raising money over the course of time, and also having been associated with the basketball program as a student, having been a manager, having roomed with players. I mean, like all of these things matter. These life lessons, they do add up. And I know there were people that weren't excited about Dolson. They looked at him as the internal candidate. They thought there were more attractive candidates elsewhere. And certainly we didn't know. Nobody could have necessarily outside predicted this. But some people just have great vision about what needs to be done. And it doesn't always come from the place that you would expect it to. And much like Woodson, being like the perfect candidate over the course of the first month or so because of his background with IU, but also his willingness to bring in new ideas. I think you can look at the same thing with Dolson, where I think an external candidate or someone who hasn't been here as long as him, maybe they don't bring that same mixture of new ideas and understanding of what the IU way is and what the culture should be. So I'm very happy with it so far. Nothing's perfect, but I think it's exciting to see where it might go.
So I think this question is probably really bad, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because it's really bad because I don't know that we know the answer. But what's next in the line of social media? And I know that it's changing forever with technology, another app, another thing that takes hold with young people or whatever else. And it's so ever changing and fast changing area. But what's next? What does Indiana men's basketball do next, maybe, or where is social media headed? And again, I don't know that that's really a good question, and there's enough time to fully address it. But it's a great start. A lot of us are being open now to it. What's the next step?
I think the next step is probably a little mundane in most people's eyes, but I think it's incredibly important, which is on social media, you cannot let the inmates run the asylum. And we've all been on Twitter, we've all been on Facebook or on message boards. And when you let people just post whatever they want with no counter, with no alternate, hey, here's what we're thinking, you allow the contrary opinions to become the majority opinion because there's nothing to counter them. And I think for IU, if I took anything out of that tweet, it is, we're going to stand up for ourselves on social media from this point forward. We're going to say to the people, you should be proud of being an IU fan. It's okay to be critical if we're not playing well, but it's not okay to cut the program down or to act in a belligerent manner or to act like we don't know what we're doing, because we do. And a lot of that, again, is being proactive as opposed to being reactive, or even worse, trying to be, so bland and inoffensive that you don't, leave any sort of an impression. It's something that I, in my career as a researcher, as someone who's, consulted with teams on social media in the past, one of the reasons I wrote the book was the idea that you would just be this passive conveyor of information. You would be this brand that doesn't really have a soul. You're just passing things along and you're not going to have any sort of personality. To me, that is a terrible way to conduct yourself in a social media environment, because it doesn't do anything. It does very little for you positive, and generally speaking, you just turn into a punching bag when things are going bad. And we've all, if you watched any of the live streams of like the Archie Miller coaching show on Facebook, I mean, you have to turn the comments off because it's brutal. And, I think for IU, whether it's football or whether it's basketball or anything else, you have to have a strong presence. You have to have your players be ambassadors when they feel like doing so. And I think that's the next step, is that level of consistency. And maybe it's not direct responses to people, but it's tweets like we saw, like, the yoga related tweet where it's like, yeah, you people actually don't know what you're talking about. And so here's some evidence as to why. And you do it in a fun manner, but it's a nice reminder that just because you're posting something doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. And I love it. Like, to me, it's what I preached for years. And no one ever listened to me. I got told I was a fool about it. And it's not, I didn't consult with them. They came up with this all on their own, but it's heartening that someone else came to the same conclusion. Yep. And it just happens to be at the place that I work and the teams that I root for.
That's great stuff, Galen. Thank you. Maybe it wasn't such a bad question. Coming up in our third segment, we'll do some subscriber shout outs, answer your questions. So stick around with us here on the Assembly Call. Man, and that's great. Delphi Bracketology Twitter just got a lot better.
Good.
Because I do throw it back a little bit, but I'm always aware as a school-based thing, not to get in too many Twitter things, but some of the stuff we get as a high school bracketology club, how we hate Florida or we hate North Carolina State or you're an idiot or, right. It's just like we talk about it with our students about what's the appropriate response, but we just got better because we're really going to analyze. I'm going to get my guys and say, what's our personality? We got to have a little bit of a pizzazz here to respond to the ridiculous, right?
I mean, I was going to mention this in the show. I wish I had. We ran out of time and we were going a different direction. But like, this is why Home Field does a great job on social media, and they're not mean about it, but they have a personality, and it's a personality that is fully in keeping with what they do, and so people they look at them in a particular way. And I think that way is positive. There's no reason why you can't do that with sports teams too.
And Galen, I just think the world of you, and I enjoy being around you, but I'm forever ticked that you introduced me to that brand because my dollars have decreased ever since, I think it was your anniversary, your 10-year Crimson Cast. That's
funny. Well,
I
hey,
met Connor, and now I gotta I hide my bank account from Mrs. Tonsoni.
Yeah, it's my solution to that. I've gotten Katie I just buy her things there, and she just loves all of the stuff that she gets. So there's no problems. Like she was really juiced about the joggers that they teased today on Twitter. So it's that's the best solution is don't hide it. You bring your wife into it. Everything will be fine.
Yeah. I got the Austin P shirt. I mean, it's just the greatest cheer ever. Flies open, let's go pee. They just do. It's just really awesome. Jared, welcome, bud.
Hi, Jared. How you doing?
What's happening, gentlemen?
Yeah, living the dream here.
We're just having.
Galen, how can you talk this much IU sports in one day? This is crazy.
Look, I'd like to remind you, I did something like 14 combined hours of post Archie Miller firing podcast in like a 5-day span. This is nothing. Like I'm getting ready for our marathon podcast that we were talking about earlier. So
yeah. Well, cool. I'm sorry I had to miss the first part. I look forward to listening back to it. I caught the very, very end of the last segment, and it was great as I figured it would be.
Well, it's been a good conversation.
Hey, what is that over your left shoulder there, Galen?
Oh, have you never seen this before?
No, is that a bison?
Yeah, this is the
interesting.
I think this dates back from the 60s. This was my parents had this. They used to have it just hanging on the back of their couch. And so it was just in a closet somewhere. And when I got the job at IU, I was going through my dad had passed away, and so I was going through like closets and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I forgot that this existed. And so it was in my office for a while, and I've brought it here to the home studio. It's it's a great piece. There's a few that I've seen that are in better condition than this, but it's just like this. It's like a woven rug, basically. And
awesome.
So there you go.
I feel like we should do more with the bison. I
think that's a great idea. We should look into that a bit more.
We should.
I gotta say, I love our commenters here on the podcast, but there's some bison hate going on that I'm not totally comfortable with. I feel like we need some re-education here as far as the bison is concerned.
I think we will. We may have to do a whole episode just on the bison.
Maybe more so much. Maybe more.
Jared, your show with Jeremy and Andrew was just really outstanding.
Thank you. It was so much fun to do.
It's just really good. A lot of good information.
I will say my one regret about that show is that I wasn't able to interview Lene Phillips for it as well, because she had a huge hand in it. And so I've already talked with her. We're going to do an interview with her because she's been just had a huge impact on everything that's going on with Indiana from a social media perspective. So I can't wait to get her on the show too. But it was so much fun to do. I mean, they were so gracious with their time, and as I'm sure you guys talked about in the last segment, it's just so exciting. The difference in the personality that Indiana has right now that they're projecting forward on social media. That's the way to do it. Galen, as you said, I caught at the tail end of last segment. You can't just go on there and be vanilla and just be passing along information. It just doesn't work. You have a personality, have a point of view. You have to create reactions.
Vanilla's great for newspaper ads, but they stopped printing newspapers a while ago. So we need to focus on something more modern.
Yeah, and Galen sold 4 books while we've been talking. Amazon's been clicking it at $80 and
$88 or whatever it is.
That reminds me. That's like that famous Onion article. Like RC Cola makes 7th sale. Great. We're almost into double digits with the book. This will be delightful. Yeah.
I was telling Galen, sometimes I read through the ad reads, get that before, but I don't necessarily read through your intros and outros and everything. And every once in a while I get caught off guard, with something you put on there, and I'm like, oh man, I hope that came across and read it in the right.
It was great. Everything about it was great.
Lesson to future podcasters: read the whole run sheet. Read the whole run sheet.
I'm gonna have ASCAP sue you for that, Jared. No, I'm kidding. No, that was great. That was surprising, but thank you. That was a great way to start things off.
You got some good music out there, man. It
Thanks.
needs to be brought back.
I need to get back in the studio. It's been like 6-7 years. I just haven't had time. But yeah, got to relearn how to play the guitar.
Oh, we owe you some royalties, probably, don't we?
That's fine. You know, I'll waive it for you guys. I'll waive it. But yeah, so yeah.
Hey, Coach, Phil
Yep.
just entered the chat. Careful.
Oh, no.
Phil is here.
Phil was talking trash before 10 minutes before the show started. He was the first comment. Like, let's get this thing started. I'm like, dang, Phil, we got 15 minutes yet. All right, we ready to go for some questions and subscriber shout outs. And Jared, wherever you want to take over, you can just take over and do what you do.
I'll do. Oh, I need to pull up the run sheet. No, go for it. I can do the subscriber shout outs though.
All right, you do that, and then I'll ask the questions and throw it both your guys' way, and we'll go. So, all right, here we go.
Hey, it's Romeo Langford. What's the only thing better than handing a game winner to beat Wisconsin? Celebrate it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with our guest, Galen Clavio, and Jared Morris now joins us for segment 3, your questions and some subscriber shout-outs. And, Jared, it's good to have you, and
Subscriber shout out.
it's all yours.
Is that new music? Did we just debut new music from the great Bob Thompson here on the assembly call?
Absolutely.
I think we did. And by the way, stick around for those of you who are excited about AC After Dark. Bob Thompson will be here. His first appearance. He's going to do his chat mob induction tonight. Which, Galen, you know, it's perfect. As we heard your music earlier today, it's really perfect to have him on when you're on talking music.
Sounds like a battle of the bands waiting to happen.
Okay, so this is the point in the show where we do our subscriber shout outs, and we have an email list. We hope that you'll join it. I think Coach told you about that earlier tonight, join.assemblycall.com. But we have this ambassador program where current subscribers recommend the email list to other subscribers. And if you do that, and if you refer a new subscriber, you get a subscriber shout out. So we're working through some of these. We have a bunch of them to do. So we're rolling through a couple of them each show. But our first subscriber shout out this week comes to us from Bloomfield, Indiana, and it is Jesse Rhodes. And Jesse's favorite Hoosier is Yogi Ferrell, who, by the way, did you guys talk about Yogi getting picked up, getting a full contract with the LA Clippers? So Yogi had a 10-day contract about 2 weeks ago. What did every single IU fan on Twitter say when Yogi got his 10-day contract? He's going to kill it. They're going to end up signing him because it's Yogi, and no one dominates a 10-day contract like Yogi Ferrell. He did it. The Los Angeles Clippers signed him. I was texting with his mom earlier tonight, congratulating her. We're so proud of you, Yogi. It's awesome to see him with the Clippers, but that's Jesse's favorite Hoosier. For his assembly call leader, Coach, Jesse chose you. But then after that, he kind of spread the love around. He said, quote, "My breakdown of each of the 4 members is this. At times, I think Jared is too positive and Ryan is too negative, but Coach and Andy are usually well-balanced. But that is what makes this show the best around. By the way, I love Ryan's rants." All right, if that's your speed, I guess. You each have your niche on the show, and I love it. Don't change. And for his special acknowledgement, Jesse continued to shower us with praise and went a step further. He said, "Thanks for all your hard work in prepping for these shows. I've learned a lot about the game through the shows. I also enjoy when you have special guests on, especially Galen and Scott. Keep up the great work." So look at that, Galen. You're getting a shout out here on the show.
I thank you. Thank you. I'm touched.
Very cool. Thank you for that, Jesse. And our second subscriber shout out comes to us from the great Sammy Jacobs, the founder of Hoosier Huddle, a website and podcast that you all should definitely be reading and listening to. Sammy is from Indianapolis. His favorite Hoosier is DJ White, and his assembly call leader is also Coach. Or is it? Sammy said, "I want to say Coach, but his head is already big enough. You all are great, but only one host has had the cops called on them during a tailgate with me. So, Brian."
Yeah, I got to dial back my tailgating. I'm at an age where I need.
What did you do? I didn't know this. What happened?
Well, Sammy would always stop by before he would go do his media work. and we just getting arguments about the football program. And he started walking towards the football field, and we kept shouting back and forth. And, you know, it's just two guys bantering, good friends bantering and talking trash. Well, someone in the mobile home heard us, and as we got louder, they called the cops, and about 20 minutes later, there was an unmarked car parked right outside my tailgate watching us for about 20 minutes, thinking like something was going to go down. And it was just Sammy and I having a good, honest, argument. So, yeah, I had the cops called on me at the tailgate. And we hadn't even started partying yet. It was like breakfast and coffee.
The cops really should have been there for the Michigan game. They came for the wrong game.
No, I wouldn't be here.
Broadcasting from Pendleton, Indiana, it's Coach Tonsoni.
Exactly.
And
I'm
then
trying to erase that from my memory.
For his special acknowledgement, Sammy says, you guys do a really good job. And of course, we agree. Sammy, right back at you. Make sure if you're listening to this, which of course you are if you're hearing these words, go to HoosierHuddle.com. Read their blog, listen to their podcast. They do great work. Thank you, Sammy and Jesse. We appreciate the shout outs. Over to you, Coach, for the mailbag.
All right, it's time for our mailbag. I said at the beginning of the show, we're getting some really great interaction in the community, and if you're not a part of the community, please join us there. And we just appreciate that you can join us at assemblycall.com/community. Again, it's really good to have these kind of questions. So let's get started right away. Erwin says, why did Mike Roberts leave IU to become an assistant basketball coach at the University of Cincinnati? Jared, can you answer that real quickly?
Because he wants to be a head coach, and Cincinnati offered him the ability to be a full-time assistant for the head coach that he used to work with at UNCG. So it was basically a no-brainer. Like, he was at Indiana, and I think he was happy to continue to help out at Indiana as long as there wasn't a full-time assistant position for him to take. But it's like, Jared, why on earth did your dad go from Indiana to Purdue? Well, because they were going to make him the defensive coordinator. You know, it's like, you got to go. If it's your career, you got to take the steps in your career. So it was an obvious move for Mike to make. We wish him well. It was awesome having him at IU, but that's where he needs to be, because it's the best next step for him.
And once you're a coach, and if you step off into a position that's not on the court and doing things, that's just a big adjustment, and that's not who you are unless you want to make that move for a career move. I think Mike wanted to be a coach and to get back on the court and doing those things. So we wish Mike well. This is to both of you. This question's from Mike. Which current player do you think we will see the most improvement from last season? So excluding the transfers and the freshmen coming in, who do you think will see the most improvement, Galen, next season?
Well, not feeling at all on the spot here with this question. I'm going to say, looking at the full, you know what? I'm going to say Rob Finney. I think he's got the highest ceiling of improvement based upon what we've seen the last couple of years in terms of, as we talked about earlier, low confidence levels and just an offense that didn't really fit what he was doing. I feel like there's as much as we've heard him talked about already by Dane Fife, who hasn't coached him at all yet officially, for him to talk about Finney and the way that he has and how good of the defensive player he is. And I think the need that IU is going to have for multiple players in the backcourt who know what they're doing, can handle the ball. I think we could see a huge leap out of Rob Finney next year.
Jared?
My first instinct was to say Trace Jackson Davis, because I think he's really going to flourish in this new system. And I think he wouldn't have come back to Indiana if he weren't determined to really make the best use of this year and really expand his game and do some more things. So I think he's going to make a huge leap. But I think, if we're really, going for, really keeping in the integrity of the question with who will see the most improvement from last season, I think it's going to be Christian Lander, because I think he's got the farthest to go because he struggled so much last year. His talent is so great. And I think when you combine his talent with a full off season, another year of physical development, a system that's more conducive to his skills, and a year to just adjust to the speed of the game, I think he's going to, last year, he had a little stretch there in the middle of the season where he was productive and the team functioned better with him on the court. Outside of that, it was a whole lot of struggle. And so I think this year we're going to see a lot more. I don't think he'll be starting, but I think he's going to be a really good energy guy, offense guy off the bench. And so I think the difference between his first year and this year is going to be like night and day. So I think that'll end up being the biggest jump, but I think the most consequential improvement will be Trace's, if I can parse words a little bit.
I think you're both right. The point guard position needs improvement overall for the basketball program, the ability to score at the rim, drive, get people, and pace of play. So I look at both of those point guards as really improving just from those differences. I think the person who needs to improve the most, and it's hard for me to say this because I have a lot of respect, is Race Thompson. He's going to have to be able to shoot in order to get minutes as the stretch four. If they really want to spread the floor and play a different type of offense, he's going to have to be able to really improve that shot and his shot confidence. We touched on four of the 7 or so coming back. Let's just say all of them better improve. We need wins to keep this good vibe going. Next question comes from David. How does a shot doctor, quote, shot doctor, go about improving a player's in-game shooting efficiency? And somewhat related, successful teams in the NCAA tourney seem to have a player who can make reasonably contested shots. Is that a teachable skill? That's that closer position that I talk a lot about. Jared, your thoughts about what can a shot doctor do to make the ball go in on game night?
Let me just jump in real quick.
No, Brian, he asked the question to me. Thank you. I think there are really three things that a shot doctor can do. One, I think, is you have to be a bit of a psychologist. You've got to understand the play because shooting is so much of its confidence. We talked with Steve Green this week inside of the community and talked to them about shooting. And I asked him, if you could be Indiana's shot doctor, what would be the number one thing you would do? He was like, you got to build these guys' confidence. So I think the number one thing you have to do is be able to build a relationship with a guy, understand what makes him tick, and help him rebuild his confidence. Then I think you would want to pick out maybe one or two technical, fundamental type things that you can help him improve. I don't think you want to redo everything because the guy's been shooting a certain way for a long time. Maybe in an off season, you try and rebuild an entire shot, but maybe there's one or two things that he can key on, like with Christian Lander, get your feet facing the basket. Jerome Hunter, make sure that you go up vertical and land in the same place where you jump. There's certain things for each guy that you can see when he's not shooting well slips, and you can help him work on that. And then I think the third thing is be the guy who's there at 11 p.m. to shoot with him if he wants to shoot, or at 2 o'clock in the morning, because you just have to get reps up. So I think those three things, if you're really going to be a shot doctor, psychology, that one critical tweak that, really kind of offers you the most leverage on that particular guy's shot, and then just being there with him to get the reps to work on it, help him build his confidence and help him, kind of stick the landing, so to speak, make sure that he's making that fundamental change. I think that's how you help a guy become a better shooter.
Jared, from a coach's perspective, I couldn't agree more with you. You don't want to be so technical that someone's thinking, because when you think, you don't shoot well. And on game night, you have to have that freedom. We've talked a little bit about opening up offense and just going and playing. And sometimes coaches, we have a tendency to be too much of a thumb down pressure, do it exactly how I want you to, which leads to thinking. And when it comes to shooting, you and being a closer, that contested shot guy, you can help put people in position, but the player's got to be able to, like, when I shoot, this ball's going in. And if I go 1 for 11, the next night I'm going to go 10 for 11. It's a mentality. So that's where that psychology stuff comes in. Galen, we're going to come to you for this one. This is from my son, Brent, who joined the community. Glad to have him in the community. And for everyone, don't pay too much attention. He's not as good as his dad at thinking basketball. But he asked a really good question, Galen, and it's ultimately the one that's going to be answered here after the glow of everything that's going on, is what should a fan's realistic expectations be for year one of the Woodson era? And we really don't know until we start seeing the play. Right now, everyone is just fantastically happy, but what should we realistically expect, in your opinion?
Well, I think the schedule is going to make some kind of an impact on whatever the actual answer is. But look, I think if you're a fan and you're looking at all of this, I think it's reasonable to expect 20 wins right now, because I think that, and I'm not saying that that's the max. I'm saying I think as kind of a mid-level expectation, if you have some things go right and go wrong, there's going to be some growing pains. You've got players playing a new system on both offense and defense. You've got new players coming in. Some teams mesh very quickly and are great right out of the gate. Some of them take a long time to develop. But I think somewhere in that 20-9 range in terms of overall record, 20-10, somewhere along those lines. Around 500, maybe better in conference. I think those are reasonable expectations. I think you could certainly see Indiana do better than that, but I'm also cautious about getting too hyped because it is a program that still has to demonstrate that it can do things on the floor, that these players can play together in a system that is successful both on the offensive and defensive sides. We don't know who the point guard is going to be. We assume it's Xavier Johnson. We don't know. We assume that Trace Jackson Davis is going to fit in this new offense and that things are going to flow around him particularly well, but we don't know. And we assume that Mike Woodson is going to be able to make a transition from the NBA to college in terms of thinking about coaching the game and putting people in the right places. So, I'm expecting some highs. I do think they'll beat Purdue at least once. So, go ahead and mark that down. And I think they'll win in the 20-game range. I think anything beyond that is kind of gravy for the first year. But that would be if you want to keep guard your heart a little bit, but still have some optimism. I think that would be a great season. That would be the best season that IU's had in half a decade. So I would be perfect. I'll just sign me up for that right now. If I could get 20 wins and a 7 seed, just transport me to next March, I'd be fine with that.
Jared, your expectations where you're at right now, Mr. Positive.
Well, look, I think I think this team has real potential. I think Galen, listening to you and Scott, Scott made a good point, which is that a lot of times in the offseason, we talk ourselves into the idealized version of every player. And when you do that, your mind runs wild with the possibilities. And that's what the offseason's for.
This is every Indiana football preview podcast until the last 2 years has been this. We're always somehow 8-4 in our minds before the inevitable 5-7 happens. So anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
No, and look, and we've made that mistake with the team, and I think we're pretty cautious with the team this year, and that caution, ended up proving correct. So I think what is realistic and kind of reasonable, I think what Galen laid out is pretty much where I'm at. 20 wins, you get back to the NCAA tournament, you're upper half of the Big Ten, you beat your rival at least once. That's a solid baseline, for a first season. I think the potential for this team is high. I don't think it's crazy. If you told me I think this Indiana team is going to win the Big Ten, I'd say, I don't think it's crazy. And we can get to the reason why with the next question. But I think I think it'd be a little crazy to expect that. But I think the ceiling, because of the talent that they have in, and if everything kind of goes right, I don't have to squint too hard to actually see that happening in how the Big Ten is shaping up to be this year. But what's reasonable, I think what Galen laid out is what's reasonable. But I think if I had to bet, I think the team will end up closer to its ceiling than closer to its floor.
Here's my expectations. One, I'm with you guys. Get to the tournament. Be in the upper half of the Big Ten. But more so than that, it's how you play. I'm tired of the droughts. I'm tired of the mental, we had a bad run, and now it's going to be a 7-point game, but it turns into a 19-point game. I'm ready for a team that doesn't just shoot the ball and score 90 points, but loses 96-90, or the team that guards, like maybe some of Archie teams guarded somewhat and got beat 61-50. A more competitive, balanced approach that plays like the messaging has been for the last month, that we're a little confident. And if the other team happens to score a few more points, then we just shake their hand and then we get ready to kick someone's ass the next time. We got to get back to that blue blood. You're coming into our house and we're going to make you pay, not hoping to win. I got to games where I was just hoping we could win, so it would be somewhat of an enjoyable post-game show and not enjoying basketball. And I think you can even enjoy basketball in losses if the play is done correctly, if you don't worry about the mental fatigue of the players and all this stuff that has been in the program. So I'm looking at my expectation, reasonable, is, hey, we're just playing good competitive basketball. And if the talent is improved and the coaching moves quickly to mesh, then yes, we can move up from that 6-7 Big Ten, maybe, and get a higher seed in the NCAA tournament. But let's get to that tournament, so forth. So elbows in, said Mike DeCourcy touched on this a bit last week. What do you think Woody has done to recognize the deficiencies from last year and correct them before May? Jared, your thoughts on what and how Coach Woodson is going to evaluate, or what he has been doing to evaluate where the team needs to go?
So this is where the source of my optimism comes from, because last year was not a good year. The coach got fired. The team went 12-15. We know all what happened last year. But I think we all agree that team wasn't that far away. Like, they were a few critical pieces away from being a good team because there's some good players in place that we all are putting some belief in this year. But the things that they were missing were critical. What were they missing? Well, kind of an alpha distributor at the point that can attack and has the confidence that you need, right? Think about what you saw with Baylor in the NCAA tournament with Davion Mitchell, right? You kind of need a guy like that is kind of your energy guy offensively. We needed shooters on the wings. We didn't have much of that. We needed some guys who, when things weren't going right, could just go get a shot in the half court. We needed someone who could play the stretch four. And we needed some guys who played with emotion on the court because the team flatlined so often. Every single thing that I just mentioned, they have addressed with either an incoming recruit or a guy from the transfer portal. Xavier Johnson gives you kind of that alpha distributor at the point. He's an emotional guy. He can create offense. Tamar Bates is a guy who can create offense and who can shoot. Miller Kopp is a guy who theoretically could play the stretch four in smaller lineups, but also is, a shooter on the wing, and also a guy who plays with emotion on the court. So those 5 glaring things that we didn't have last year, they were able to pinpoint those and bring in guys that address those specific needs. Now, there's 13 guys on the roster. It's going to be difficult to kind of divvy up playing time, and only 5 guys can play at once. So there's still that whole challenge. But I look at last year and what the deficiencies were, and they've plugged some of those holes. And so if those guys come, Parker Stewart, if he ends up being the shooter that we think, now you start to kind of look at, okay, what is a lineup of Xavier Johnson, Tamar Bates, Parker Stewart, Miller Kopp, and Trace Jackson Davis look like? Boy, it certainly seems like it fills a lot of the holes that we didn't have last year. Now, how are those guys going to function together? I have no idea. But you start to see, hey, if this thing does go well, that's why I think the ceiling of the team is Big Ten title. Don't know if they'll get there because basketball teams are tricky and chemistry is a weird thing. And, it's Coach Woodson's first year coaching college basketball, all that stuff. But I'm really impressed with how they figured out in short order what the problems were and brought in players who have demonstrated that they can fill those needs.
Galen?
I think it's simpler than all of that. I think everything Jared said makes a lot of sense. I just think Mike Woodson needs to spend the offseason getting these players to believe in themselves and believe in the team. I really don't. I mean, I've been on this track for probably since January, maybe even earlier than that, where this team just seems to suffer from a crisis of confidence, a lack of fun, a lack of feeling like there was any point to what they were doing. Everything looked perfunctory. Everything looked like it was just playing out the string. And it didn't mean that they didn't win some games. And the games where things were rolling, the Minnesota game at home being a great example. It was like, where the hell has that been? And then it would go away just as quickly. And so similar to Tom Allen, it took a couple of years for Tom Allen, I think, to get to this point. And it took some heavy recruiting to fill the gaps that were there from Wilson's last couple of years. I think 75% of it is getting the players that are already on the roster to believe in what they're doing, to believe in what Mike Woodson's telling them to do, and to not be afraid when they're on the floor, not be afraid of mistakes, not be afraid of putting a shot up. And then certainly I think bringing in Tamar Bates and Miller Kopp and Xavier Johnson, that's important because you got to bring in players that can execute and have a certain level of talent and skill, but there's a lot of talent and skill already on the team. So if you can get that group believing in themselves, it kind of goes back to what Jared was talking about with the shot doctor. Like most of that, it's like putting. Most of it's mental. Everybody knows the mechanics, but it's that, the synapses firing in the right order so that you're not putting a hitch in the putt or you're not, doing something with the shot that's causing it to not go in. It's the same across the board with the basketball team. And if Mike Woodson can get this group believing in what it's doing, I don't know that it needs to do a whole lot else.
I like everything about that. I like everything about that.
Man, you had Coach Woodson say that twice, Galen. You're just really on top of everything. From a coach's perspective, you just keep analyzing your team. You watch a lot of film to see what their strengths and weaknesses were last year and how it fits into your philosophy. You watch workouts when you're allowed to, whatever the NCAA allows you to do. It's always better to see them in person, and you constantly think, where can you put these people, both mentally and physically, in places that they can succeed? And that's what Coach Woodson seems to have done already early on. and it seems to be working. And he's still got a lot of work in order to make it happen in November and December and in big time play. So
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
So before we move on, we still have a ton of questions, but we'll answer those either in the community. Jared and I will get in there and answer them in the community. I may type up something to answer those questions, or maybe even do a coach's corner just to answer their question. There's some basketball related things about the pack line and defensive philosophy that maybe will guide me in the next one. But we have Bob Thompson to get to and move on. So we're gonna end the regular podcast and head to Assembly Call After Dark. And so this week's episode is going to come to an end. I thank Galen for joining us. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Bob Thompson, who you'll see shortly, for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week or sooner if any news breaks. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
You might get beat today, but each day you got to get better.
Here I come, Coach Fife. I'm going to get paid by the drop. That is what my agent is negotiating. I have a mad crush on Dane Fife. Man, Coach Fife, don't be listening to this. I don't want to have to buy you dinner or anything. I'm just a measly high school guy.
Coach Fife would love this. This would be right up his alley.
I'm turning AC After Dark over to you. We got a real special guest, talented guest coming on the show, Jared. So
you're still recording, right, Coach?
I am still recording.
Keep
it is
rolling.
Still going. It is still
Keep it
rolling.
Ladies
Ready
and
to roll.
gentlemen, very pleased to introduce the great Bob Thompson here to AC After Dark. We need like an intro song for you.
I thought about that. I thought about making something really like ridiculous and self-congratulatory, but I didn't. It's a lot of work to do something for a small joke like that. So no.
It is. Well, and it's a lot of work to do all the songs that you have done. And so just let me start this off by saying thank you for all of the work. It's funny, like when you're listening to audio, there's so many little touches that make an audio show work and that make it a special experience and that make it more than just people talking. That's why we kind of do the audio drops and try and do some sound effects. But to me, when I'm listening to a show and a show has these really cool, well-produced like segment intros and music, it adds something. It's almost difficult to describe what it does for the audio experience. I think what you've done over the last few years for this show is really, it's just awesome. And so I want to say thank you for all that work, because I think it makes a huge, huge difference, just for everybody listening and for the personal pride that I take in the show. So it really has made a big difference. So I hope you know how much we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it too. I was reflecting before coming on here, thinking about how all of this even happened, at least with my involvement. And so I went back in my email and I found the first email I ever sent you. I sent you an email March 13th, 2015, just to say, hey, thanks for doing the show. Because I live in Muncie. I got friends here, but none of my friends here grew up in Bloomington. None of them went to IU. So, I want to sit around and talk about Calbert Cheaney and Alan Henderson sometimes. They're like, who? It's just like, come on, man, But on Twitter, I just stumbled upon the Assembly Call. It's like, they do this after every show. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm Jared. Like, Jared is me. Like, I'm always optimistic. Before each season, I'm thinking, I don't see a loss on the schedule. I think we're just going to run the table. And then people have to talk me down, but I don't know. It's such an amazing show and a great way to process each game. And I didn't play basketball in high school. Like, hearing people who did play basketball and hearing Coach Tonsoni, who coaches basketball and all these things, makes me a smarter fan. I was busy playing piano in high school, but look at me now. I get to contribute what I did in high school to help the show too. So thank you for letting me be involved. Like, I love the show. And Galen, I'm glad you're here too. That I did not know that was going to happen. I love Crimson Cast. I've actually got deep ties to football. My mom was the administrative assistant for coaches Cameron through Lynch and even a little into Wilson. And so really close to the football program, which has been a very difficult emotional journey, as you can imagine. Until recently. But yeah, no, thank you. I love doing this stuff. I'm glad you like it. I think like most humans, I'm my worst critic, so when I hear them come on, I feel this mix of like pride that I get to be involved, but I hear all the inaccuracies and like the times where it's not mine, it's like some other one. I was like, oh, that one sounds so polished. How can I get it to sound that good? And but I'm just glad you let me be involved. I love being able to be a part of something bigger than myself and something so great.
Well, it's fantastic, and I think I want to play. All of the ones that you have sent over, I think are great, but for me, I don't know which one is your favorite. In fact, let me ask you that first. Which one of all the jingles that you've done, the songs you've done, which one is your favorite? Because I have one that I think is like that's just the best.
That's hard. That's a hard one. I think Ryan's was my favorite to do because it pokes fun at him, and he's just such an easy target. Actually, real quick, Ryan's story. I went to the meetup right before the whole world shut down with COVID. I went to the meetup in Bloomington.
Yeah.
I ran into Andy at Assembly Call, had a nice chat. I came up to you and Coach at the event, had a nice chat. I ran up to Ryan. I think he had just left the restaurant. He gave me a wet handshake. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Ryan. So that was my only interaction with Ryan Phillips. So
it's
all that
completely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And so I think his was my favorite to make, but then it's hard too, because it's like, it's a hip hop thing. Like, I mean, this is an audio podcast, but those of you on YouTube, do I look like I do hip hop? Do I sound like I do hip hop? Like, that's not my thing. So I felt kind of insecure, but it made me chuckle because he's just an easy target. So that's probably my favorite one.
All right, let's listen to it real quick. And we're going to play it full because like you sent over these full ones. And so we use shorter versions for the intro, for the actual intros when we do the show. But here's the full Ryan Phillips jingle. And you and I go back and forth on these sometimes on email, trying to capture the person's essence with it, and I think you wrote all the lyrics for this one yourself, I believe.
I did.
Yeah, you did this one yourself. So here is the Ryan intro jingle, which is just fantastic.
All you other voices get out of the way, cause Ryan's got 100,000 things to say. The shot doctor's gonna go off on Coach Care, how the Big Ten refs screw up every day. He's a senior writer for the Big Lead. His Majesty's words are the elixir we need. The only problem is he won't concede the mic to other voices even if they agree. Analyzing players, finding every wrinkle. He hasn't ever hosted, never lifted a finger. He's got all the answers.
Well, let me quickly add just one thing about this.
Dude just interrupted his own jingle.
I mean, that's just perfect. That is absolutely perfect for Ryan. I love you referring to him as His Majesty. I had forgotten about that little touch.
I just figured that's kind of how he views himself, so I wanted to kind of throw that in there.
It's great, man. It really is great. And I know we're in the middle of working on an AC After Dark song. Intro music for AC After Dark, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, we did a poll in the community, and then I kind of regretted it afterwards because like the winner by far was like an R&B slow jam. I'm like, I gotta sing an R&B slow jam? Like, oh geez, like I'm gonna push my auto-tune to the brink because I do a lot of things well musically. I can say that. My least secure one is singing. Like I can sing, but I'm not a singer. And I feel like songs like that are made because you got a singer. And so I'll come up with something.
Galen, I would love to get your perspective on this too, because I'm not sure if people know your background in music and how much music you've done, and you've got albums out there, which that's kind of why I wanted to hint at it in the intro of this show.
Yeah.
But you laugh, but it's good music,
Thanks.
and it's, as someone who always wishes that he was.
Thank you.
There it is.
Yeah. Wow. It's like the whole thing is interesting because for me, music's been kind of this just thing that I've done on my own. I started getting into home recording when I was like 17. I had like a 4-track that didn't completely work, and I played guitar, and it was just like, let's record some demos. And that was essentially the extent of it. And then that builds over time. And especially, I spent a lot of my 20s with not a lot of human companionship, like living in Iowa as a radio broadcaster, where everybody in town is either under 18 or over 45. So there's like not a lot of social interaction taking place. So, you sit in your apartment and you learn how to use Adobe Audition properly to create mixes. And, and I've always been a huge music fan in general, and dissecting how mixes work and how different elements get put together, as I'm sure Bob is aware. You know, I mean, it's there's a science to it, but it's an art at the same time. And to me, that's always been what's compelling about it. And for me, it's always been, okay, can I write something that I'm happy with? And I think that's always the pursuit. There's always something you're unhappy about. Like there's rarely, if ever, you're going to get to a point where you're completely satisfied with what you did. And the problem with making music is it's multifaceted, because there's the writing part, there's the performance part, there's the mixing part. And at some point along the way, whenever you're listening to your stuff, you're going to hear 100 things that you did wrong. And, that's what makes it fun, though. And it's also cool because 10 years down the line, that song that you've played a couple times now, I mean, that song was written in like 2001 and recorded like 4 or 5 different times, like a bunch of different versions of it. And that's not even the best version of that song that's there. It's just the one that happened to get put out on the album. So yeah, it's one of the, it's great because it's imperfect, and I love that. And even if no one listens to it, it's nice to have kind of a memento of the creative process.
When it's interesting, you say that you can hear all the flaws in it, and Bob, as you said, you hear the jingles play and you can hear all the flaws. And to me and Coach, like, we listen to it and it sounds like this perfect, coherent production where it's like, my God, that's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, because
I fooled him again.
Well, but that's the thing about music, is you're creating this piece of art for an audience. Mm-hmm. And so often the audience is not thinking about it with the critical eye that you are. They're just taking it in and experiencing it as this whole thing, whereas you can kind of see all the parts of it, and so that's got to make it interesting from your perspective to create, and can you ever, with a piece of your own music, have that kind of detached experience where you just experience it, or is it always just
it's always
hearing
critical.
all the parts and pieces? Yeah, it's
always critical. It's not always critical bad though, because like there are some things that I like about the jingles, or else I wouldn't have sent them to you in the first place, right? Like it's never going to be perfect, but it passed at least this is not bad enough to keep from sending, if that's a way to put it. But the jingles are the hardest for sure, because when I first contacted you, I remember I was getting ready for work and I heard what I thought was assembly call on my TV early in the morning. I'm like, that's not right. And it was just one of the, music things that you either got for free or paid for that you used at the time. And it was playing for a jeans commercial. I'm like, huh? And I kind of felt offended because I'm like, I don't want my podcast's music being played elsewhere. And so that's what prompted me to email you. I didn't look up when that one was, but I'm like, hey, I heard this music elsewhere. I can play music. Would you be interested in some custom music? And you were all excited. And so like, that's one thing if I'm just playing some background music and send it to you, but then you're like, what about jingles? And here are these things. I'm like, oh, now I got to sing. Because I mean, Galen, I'm assuming you'd feel the same. Like when you sing and you put that out there, it's like, that's a vulnerable thing to do. It's like, well, my guitar is me, but my voice is really me, it's a scary thing, at least for me to do.
I will say having a broadcasting background helped me get over that a lot, because I mean,
sure.
I'm doing hockey games and baseball games when I'm in my 20s, and you just have to get used to people. Like your voice is your passport at that point. To borrow a line from what movie was that? Sneakers or whatever it was from the 90s. But to me, I just kind of got used to that aspect of it. I will say there's a kind of a weird detachment you get. I remember reading an article about Simon and Garfunkel, and they're in the car, and the disc jockey comes on and announces that Sound of Silence has hit #1, and they start playing it, and Garfunkel looks at Paul Simon. He's like, man, those guys must be having a great time with their life right now. Like it's just a completely different group of people. And I do think that there's a certain element of that where you can hear what you're doing on something that people are really enjoying. People really enjoy the work that you've done, and it's cool, but it also doesn't quite feel like it's yours. It feels like it's almost escaped you and gone. And it to some degree, I think it's why people that write like professional music that gets judged from an artistic perspective, when people ask them, well, what does this mean? or what do the lyrics mean? Like a lot of it's really up to the audience. Once I finish it and record it and it's out there, it really belongs to those people. At least that's how I've always felt about it. It leaves you at that point.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective to have. I should strive for that, I guess.
Well, and Bob, it's been a thrill for me because I wish I was musical. Like I've often said, like if I could have a talent that I don't have, it would be the ability to sing. Like I would love to be the lead singer of a band. I think that would be so much fun, but I can't sing, so it's never been in the cards. And I played the piano when I was younger, but I was never musical. But I love like actually creating music. Like when we're going back and forth with lyrics, it is so much fun for me. I love that part of it. I emailed you today. Like I was trying to think of lyrics for the AC After Dark thing, and it came to me while I was washing dishes. So I'm like, I got it. So I like threw the dish down, like turned the water off. I'm like running, dripping water as I'm running to the keyboard to send it to you before I lost it. So it's been fun for me because I've been able to kind of indulge that a little bit, and then bring the songs in here and get to listen to them for something I care about. So it's really been a thrill, because you actually bring the ability to create the music. So
a couple things, Bob. One, I play it for my students, and they think it's the coolest thing ever that I have a jingle. Like I've arrived. It's like giving me some street cred, man. So I owe you a dinner.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
Classic.
I mean, so sometimes when I really want to, I have a walk-up song now, and you're like a Major League Baseball player with your walk-up song. I think it's really cool. I've also used it on date night with Mrs. Tonsoni.
Yeah.
Like when I come out and I'm ready to go, it's Tonsoni time. I play it over to Bluetooth, and she better be ready to go, Bob. So
Wait.
that's my walk-up song, to go out to the movies or something. So
okay,
I need to issue a formal apology to Mrs. Tonsoni. That was not my intention. Wow.
No,
This is
really
AC After Dark, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. We got to get to the After Dark part here. No, but it's a talent, and I'm always trying to tell my students to find their passion and try to pursue it or enjoy your passion if you can. I know you gotta, you can't always just find work in your passion, but too many times I think in education we force people into certain modules or certain places, and so many people have talent, and to share that talent like you are doing with us, because you appreciate what you've been on the show, just means the world to us, and it's kind of why I do this on Thursday nights is to help, and you're helping us out by making it a lot more pleasurable than just seeing my ugly picture on the screen talking about basketball. So I can't thank you enough. Seriously, I think it's just been a great addition to our show, and it's forced me to know how to download and run a soundboard. So I've advanced. But thanks, Bob. Seriously, it's been really we really enjoy what you've contributed.
It's my pleasure. Like it's the same too. Like I'm in education. I'm a 5th grade teacher, so I don't do music stuff on the clock, and so this has given me a nice concrete thing to do music for, because I'll pick up my guitar and play for 5-10 minutes on occasion. But if I have a goal, like Jared emails me like, oh, how about a jingle for this? Then I've got this project, and it motivates me and puts me in my studio. For those listening, I'm using quotes. I'm in my small spare guest room with a keyboard and 2 guitars, and that's about it. So that's my studio.
It's where the magic happens.
It's where the you once in an email, Jared, you said, explore the studio space. And I just chuckled to myself. It's like, what? I'll swivel in my chair. I could do that, I suppose. But there's not a lot of space.
Let me download a plugin.
That's right. That's right. So with all my virtual instruments, playing the drums on my keyboard, that's how it goes around here. So,
how long does it take you from start to finish, and how many times do you go back and say, I want to fix this little piece or that? And then at what point do you say, hey, I just got to get it to Jared, or I got to get it to somebody? What's your process?
That's a great question. If I have an idea, I can go pretty quickly. Like I'm a pretty good guitar player. I'm a pretty good piano player. And then with drum stuff, I play it in real time on a keyboard, which I guess is a niche talent in itself. But with software, you can do this thing called quantize, where basically you hit a button and it's perfectly in time. So I don't need to stress about doing takes over and over and over again. So if I have an idea, I could get a rough draft in under an hour, I would say. Now, with for example, for AC After Dark, we start tossed this idea around last week, and I didn't get my real good idea until yesterday. And so like that was a long time. But a lot of the process doesn't actually happen when I'm sitting here. I was listening to an interview. It was on Conan O'Brien's podcast, and he interviewed John Cleese of all people. But he said, when you're a writer, you're writing all the time in your head. It's not just when you sit down. And oftentimes you do most of the work in your head before you sit down. And that's true for me too, where I'm thinking of ideas, I'm thinking of arrangement and instrumentation. And once I get the idea, I can crank it out. Now, once I get the rough draft, I listen to it in here, and then in my speakers in the living room, and then I go in my car, and then I go in my wife's car, and then I tweak it. And I probably do that for a span of 24 to 48 hours because it always sounds different. And the thing that's hardest for me production wise is if you want to do music professionally, you go to a studio, and studios are treated to have perfect like sound when you mix it. I'm in a rectangular room, which is less than ideal, with speakers that are less than ideal. So like, that's why I'll never have the polish of a professional recording. And that irks me. And I'm learning it does not irk you guys at all. You think it's great, which is great for me. It kind of helps ease the pressure. So that's kind of the process. Most of it's in the head beforehand. Once I got it, it's really not too bad of a process, and it's a lot of fun. So even if it does take a while, it doesn't feel that way.
Great comment from Tony, who says Bob puts his pants on one leg at a time, but when his pants are on, he makes gold records. That's where the Explore the Studio Space reference comes, of course. By the way, apparently this Conan John Cleese interview that you're talking about is incredible. Alex says that interview is some of the best non-pod IU podcast material he's ever heard. So
it was very good.
You know, the other thing that's interesting, Bob, you mentioned that you're a teacher, just like Coach is a teacher and Galen is a teacher, and you know Chris from IU Artifacts is a teacher. We got a lot of teachers who populate the assembly call airwaves here. And so how long have you been a fifth grade teacher?
Oh man, I'm a Grizzly veteran of 2 years now. Okay. So I went to Ball State, so I didn't even go to IU. I grew up in IU, but I went to Ball State, studied communications. I was actually in music ministry for 13 years. And then I worked with at-risk youth, which transitioned into being a fifth grade teacher. Last year was my first year, and what a first year because COVID and everything. And this is my second year. We've actually been in person the whole year, which is, I feel like, kind of more rare for the country these days. But it's been awesome. Like, I love working with kids. I like being a male teacher in an elementary school. We're kind of a rare breed. And I became a teacher because I worked with a lot of at-risk youth. I identified a lot of these at-risk youth, like, just don't have good male role models in their lives. I want to be that. And I want to be that maybe in kids' lives before they end up at a facility due to delinquent behaviors. And so,
that's awesome.
Yeah, I've been a teacher. This is my second year. I really like it.
That is awesome.
Man, I tell you, you elementary teachers are just a blessing, man. I don't know how you do it. I mean, you got to have high level energy. You know, I have my own issues with juniors and seniors, but they pale in comparison with the amount of attention and care and energy that you have to bring at that elementary level. So thanks for doing that.
Well, first of all, thank you. And you're welcome. I feel like it's just a different skill set. Like, I could not teach kindergarten through second grade. I couldn't. I just don't have that. Like, I can handle a sassy preteen way better than I can handle a crying kindergartner who can't tie their shoe. Right. But then I could probably handle a sassy preteen better than I could a high school junior or senior. Because yes, you need elementary or energy in elementary school, but those kids give you a lot of that. Like, a lot of those kids have much to spare. And so you've got a lot going on in the room, but yeah, it's a good job.
That is awesome. Good for you, man. We need more people like you that have that purpose.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
I see the dogs have made an appearance here on AC After Dark.
At least one of the dogs has, yes. He has to make a cameo every single time I'm on here.
So I know it's getting late and we don't want to go too much longer, but Bob, it's so much fun talking with you, and we need to get you on the show more. I mean, you just need to become a part of coming on the show. I want to get like an IU memory from you though. Like, what is like, I know you talked about, Calbert Chaney and Alan Henderson. What is kind of your first IU basketball memory that locked you in to where decades later you're writing music for an IU basketball podcast?
I'm going to cheat and give you two. First one's not IU, but my dad was in the Army. So I was born in Virginia, lived in Hawaii of all places from ages 2 to 5. When I was 5, the summer of '88, we moved here to Bloomington. One of my earliest Bloomington memories is I'm shooting baskets in my new driveway at my new house with a little basketball. And this man comes by our driveway, pulling his daughter in a wagon. He's chatting to my dad. And then he yells to me, "You a Hoosier yet?" And I was like, huh? Like I didn't know what that meant. It turns out when you live in Hawaii, you don't get to watch a lot of IU basketball. My dad's a huge fan. He went to IU, but I just didn't know. And my dad just kind of chuckled and he went on his way. And that man ended up being J.R. Holmes, like legendary high school basketball coach.
Yeah.
I lived 2 doors down from J.R. Holmes when I moved to Bloomington.
Wow.
So that's my first Hoosier memory. My first basketball memory, I don't remember which came first. I remember my dad screaming at the top of his lungs for one of the Jay Edwards buzzer beaters in the 88-89 season and coming down to like, what happened? And then he's like, watch this. And I saw the replay. And so I got excited.
I love how there are so many options for what that could be.
I know. But then also that season, my dad took me to a game and I had never been to a game. And you guys know the first time you walk into Assembly Hall, you're hooked. Like it's just amazing. And he took me down during warmups to the court level and you don't know how tall those players are until you're court level, especially when at that point I was 6.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, you're 6 years old, you see something, you attach. Eric Anderson was my attachment. I thought he's my favorite player. Why? I don't know. I'm 6, but he's my favorite player. So 32 became my favorite number. It's still my favorite number. That's the jersey I have on my IU jersey. So that's my earliest memory. And so, but we were season ticket holders. And so I grew up going to multiple games a year. I didn't understand why anybody wouldn't. Like, it just didn't occur to me, like, wait, doesn't everyone go? Everyone goes to games, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was just part of the upbringing. And that was a big culture shock when I moved away from Bloomington. I moved to Muncie, Indiana in the year 2000, and no one cares about anything here in Muncie. Like, no one cared about Ball State athletics for sure. The football team had the nation's longest losing streak, and David Letterman did a spot every Monday. He's like, here's the Ball State highlights. It would show our one touchdown and say, and Ball State loses 42-7, extending the streak. It's like, it was just dead culturally.
So put that on the sign when you drive in. Muncie. No one cares about it.
No one cares. It's changed a lot. Whatever. It's changed a lot, but that was 21 years ago. I'm getting old. But,
what elementary school did you go to?
Well, so we talked about this on Twitter. I went to Childs. You and I went to elementary school together, Jared, which is nuts. You were a year ahead of me.
That's crazy.
And I had a thought today. Did you play Smithville basketball?
Yes. Oh yeah.
When you were in 4th grade, do you remember the name of the team you played on in Smithville basketball?
No, I might if you like.
When I was in 3rd grade and you would have been in 4th, I played on a team called the Bucks, and I just wondered, is there any chance Jared and I played on the same basketball
I remember
team?
I played for the Wee Willies T-ball, like Little League baseball team was Wee Willies. I can't remember the name of the Smithville team though.
Gotcha. So yeah, but you and I went to elementary school level. I sang in middle school choir with General Chad Schwarzkopf.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, just the connections in this community are nuts.
Incredible.
And then he contacted
Bob,
me.
If you two did play, you never got any shots because Jared is going to take all the shots.
Not back then. Not back then, Coach. Not back then. I was just a little pudgy guy that didn't really know what he was doing on a basketball court back then.
Me too.
I guess we all were. Maybe everybody was at Smithville.
I didn't hear what team Scott played on in Bloomington when he was growing up. We might have an even stronger connection here. So
I got to look. My mom still has like some old VHS tapes from Smithville, and of course they still have a VCR to play them on. I guess Galen does too, so I shouldn't scoff at that. It can be very useful.
I'm on like my 5th VCR in the last 6 years, by the way.
I'm gonna go next time I'm home. I'll be at home for Mother's Day probably. I'm gonna look and see if I can figure it out because that'd be incredible.
Yeah, I'm almost certain at least at recess one day we were in the same game of basketball.
I bet so
because I played a ton, and I assumed you did too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's
Who would have
crazy.
known?
All right, so last question for you before we get out of here. Just give me your thoughts on the program right now. I know you kind of had the same malaise that wait, did we get to your question? We didn't get to your question, did we?
Not on air. It was answered in the community. Coach answered it in the community.
That's right. Okay, so you said this question. We were going to answer it. You said, I haven't felt this good about Indiana basketball since Archie Miller got hired.
Whoops.
At times, I now feel gun-shy about letting myself feel all in on my usual evergreen optimism. Tell me why I should ignore my triggered PTSD and truly believe that success is on the way. So we can certainly answer that, but give me your gut feeling right now, how you're feeling.
So I wrote that because I'm scared of my gut feeling, which is we're going to win it all. Not the whole, whatever, but we're going to feel like we're back in the conversation. That's how I feel, right? I did not like the Woodson hire when I immediately heard about it. And granted, I've been educated since, I didn't really understand who Mike Woodson was. Like I knew he played for us, and that's kind of it. And I knew he was in my deck of IU basketball playing cards. That's really all I knew. But, the staff he puts together, knocked it out of the park. The players he kept, knocked it out of the park. Except for Armand, but then Armand's gone. You get, Bates. It's just like, oh my gosh. And I listened to the interview with Bates and Kopp on Hoosier Hysterics. It's like, okay, yeah, we're going to win the Big Ten. Like, that's just kind of where I go emotionally. And then I have to pump the brakes because I felt like we were going to win the Big Ten when Archie got hired. So my gut says we're going to win a lot, but then I'm trying to temper that because I've been burned.
Yeah. Okay. So Galen, tell Bob why he should ignore his triggered PTSD and truly believe that success is on the way.
Well, gosh, I mean, I think most of our PTSD is pretty well earned, but I think you can have reasonable expectations that are significantly higher from what we've experienced up to this point. I look, I'll always say guard your heart to some degree as we get started on things, because you don't want to get into that. I think especially when the Crean era got going, one of the things that wore people out was that people got fully into it and then had to back off almost against their will. And then by the time it came to get fully into it again, everybody was too gun shy to do so. I think this feels different, though. I really do, because it feels like the program's in the hands of people who know what they're doing. Yeah. And that is a big, important part of making this work. And so that's, I guess, if I'm predicating my hope on anything, it is that I feel like the people understand the program, what needs to happen. And it's not one person trying to do everything. It's a bunch of people trying to do things, all of whom have had success at varying levels. So that gives me a lot more confidence that I would have had even if they'd hired the best possible college coach to come in and it was still that one person. I think that in the back of my head, I'd still be like, I'm not totally going to commit to this because it could turn out bad, because it has the last couple of times. Yeah. So that's my selling point, I guess, is that there's enough people here who have had high level success that it feels like it would be a real shock if everything just, went the wrong direction, went pear-shaped, as the English say.
Bob, okay. I'm with you 100%, and I'm in the same spot that you are and have been with the hire and so forth. So it just feels different, and we talked about that earlier on the show. There's just been enough positive, enough things that show me what from afar we were actually missing under Crean and Miller. And I think that we're starting to recapture that. And as Galen said, I'm guarding my heart till I see what's happening on the basketball floor. But I think even if it's not a top Big Ten or a top seed in the NCAA, I think just the whole program by itself is in a better place. And that makes me happy. And so, I'm generally an all-in on every coach hire that Indiana's made in football and basketball in the last two, only to be let down. So I'm a little more guarded this time as well, but it feels a lot different. And I think the foundation is different. When I look back at Archie Miller's hire, when I look back at Tom Crean's hire, I don't see that foundation when they started as much as I do now. And again, maybe that's my crimson-colored glasses shining through a little bit, but the foundation seems different. It seems like it was back in the 80s when I went to school. That's what I'm hanging my hat on.
I'm convinced. Undefeated. We're going undefeated this year. I feel it now. I'm convinced.
And Bob, I'm also not sure why you submitted your question with text, because you've actually submitted a similar question via audio before, which you might have to play now.
Should I believe in the high? Will our depth be out of sight? Will each position really be too deep? I do not know when I'm losing sleep. I've heard it before. But will it show up when they're on the floor? Should I believe in the high? Should I believe in the high? Should I believe in the high?
Actually, that's by far your most underrated piece of music that you sent to us. There's just less opportunities to use it, but I'm going to find them because that was a brilliant one.
That was one of those. As soon as I saw that tweet you sent, that was like instant, like that's it. And so the whole day at school, I'm thinking through in my head. I came home, probably churned it out in like 45 minutes and sent it.
It was great.
Thank you.
It was great. Well, Bob, Thank you for everything that you've done for the show. Thank
Absolutely.
you for coming on. This was awesome. I look forward to the next time we're all in Bloomington and we can hang out again. It was great meeting you at the meetup. We'll try to make sure that Ryan is a little bit better behaved, has better manners, doesn't give you a wet handshake out of the bathroom.
I'll bring a hand towel.
These are the stories that come out on AC After Dark, soon to have its own theme music. So that was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's awesome to meet you, Galen. Awesome to re-meet you guys, Coach and Jared. It's anytime. I love it. Love you guys.
Might need to have a collaboration, Bob and Galen.
Ooh.
I mean, let me know. We'll trade some wave files. It'll be great.
That's right.
I feel like it should sound better than just trade wave files. Let's get in the studio together.
Collaborate on GarageBand. I mean, we've got options at our disposal here. So.
I could get another swivel chair for my room here. We could, I'm vaccinated.
I mean, the big thing has been, can we do this? Can we do this online? Can we, we'll use StreamYard. We'll just collaborate in it'll be delightful. We'll make it happen somehow.
Cool. Sounds awesome.
That's great.
That is awesome. All right, everybody. Coach, thanks for hosting.
Yep.
Thanks everybody for being here. By the way, I'm going to put the Steve Green audio from the community out as a podcast. Look for that later next week. We're going to do an interview with some more people about the social media stuff. So we got lots of content coming. Galen and Scott will fill in the gaps when we're not doing stuff. Alex over at Podcast on the Brink. It's a heck of a network of IU shows that we have going on here.
It is quite fascinating.
It's awesome.
Wonder if something could be done with those shows.
By some chance.
Maybe.
Wonder if there's a vision.
We'll leave it at that.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me. It was always a pleasure, Bob. Great to see you in person. Big fan of the work. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Keep your elbows in.
Peace,
Eyes on the
everybody.
rim. And go Hoosiers. And don't shake Ryan's hand.
I feel like COVID has ended the handshake